The garden you want is already written in the soil if you know where to look. In the first 10 heartbeats after you step into your plot, the contrast becomes obvious. A soil built like Roman gardens breathes, holds water, and quietly outcompetes pests without a single chemical. That's the hook. Ancient, tested tactics that create resilience, flavor, and yield without the expense and damage of modern chemical dependency. This deep dive lays out 7 practical, actionable, Roman-rooted methods you can apply this season to transform your beds into living ecosystems that get stronger with each passing year. Layered living soil rather than deep tilling. Roman farmers treated soil like a living organ, and they avoided the aggressive, repeated digging that breaks fungal webs and accelerates organic matter loss. In a modern backyard, replicate that living approach by layering organic matter on top of beds instead of turning it in. Spread 2 to 3 inches of shredded leaves, aged straw, or finished compost over your beds each fall or early spring, and allow earthworms and microorganisms to work it downward naturally. This surface-fed strategy keeps soil structure intact, increases water infiltration, and reduces weed pressure by shading weed seeds. Over several seasons your soil will feel springy, hold moisture far longer, and support deeper rooting, outcomes that no annual plow can buy. Planned crop rotation to interrupt pests and rebuild fertility. Romans rotated fields with purpose. Heavy feeders were followed by legumes or fallow and root crops alternated with grains. For home gardeners, use a simple 4-part rotation across beds and plot years. Rotate tomatoes, peppers, and brassicas into different beds than root crops and legumes. Follow a heavy feeder year with a legume year, peas or beans, to restore nitrogen naturally. This practice breaks pest and disease cycles and prevents the steady nutrient bleed that forces modern farmers into chemical fertilizers. Keep a small notebook or a photo of your beds at planting, so you never repeat a weak pattern. Polyculture and companion planting to confuse pests and invite allies. Romans interwove edible plants with aromatic herbs and flowers, so that pest insects could not find a single host site, and beneficials had food and shelter. Create the same effect by design. Plant basil and marigolds near tomatoes, sow nasturtiums beside brassicas, tuck garlic and chives at the edges of beds. Rather than, planting in static rows, try to think of your bed as a tapestry where every plant has a role: nutrient maker, pest deflector, pollinator feeder, or even a structural partner. This kind of diversity interrupts pest reproduction and, it also attracts helpful predators like hoverflies and parasitic wasps. The result is fewer outbreaks and, honestly, more stable yields, without using even a drop of pesticide. Green manure and cover cropping. They feed the soil right where it is. If you want sustained nitrogen and improved tilth without any synthetic inputs, just plant green manures in fall or between cropping windows. Romano-style cover crops are simple. Sow a mix of legumes and deep-rooted grasses after harvest. Let them grow until early bloom, and then cut them down at the base. So, just leave the residues on the surface to decompose or, lightly mulch them, but don't remove them. For a quick, practical formula, sow 1 to 1.5 ounces of hairy vetch seed per 10 square feet, or 1.5 to 2 ounces of crimson clover per 10 square feet. Allow 6 to 10 weeks of growth before the main season, and terminate by cutting and leaving the tops as a mulch. This sequence returns nitrogen, increases organic matter, and, disrupts soil-borne pests that depend on continuous hosts. Slow compost and fermented plant extracts work as living fertilizers. The Romans did not rush compost. They made deep, stable humus that released nutrients steadily. So, to build a compost pile, you'll want to do it in layers, using equal volumes of fresh manure, green plant material, and dry carbon like straw. Aim for a moisture content that feels, like a wrung-out sponge. If you want a measurable target, that's about 50 to 60% moisture, enough to form a loose ball without water dripping. Turn the pile occasionally, but not obsessively, and then age it for 6 to 12 months for a dark, crumbly humus. For a fermented tonic used by Roman growers, follow this exact garden-safe recipe. Mix 1 part well-aged manure with 5 parts water and allow it to ferment in a covered container for 7 to 10 days, stirring daily. Strain the liquid and dilute 1 cup of that fermented concentrate into 1 gallon of water before applying to the base of plants. For an aerobic compost tea to top-dress leaves and soil, fill a 5-gallon bucket with fresh, chlorine-free water, add 2 cups of mature compost, stir in 1 tablespoon of unsulfured molasses, and aerate continuously with an aquarium pump for 24 to 48 hours. Strain, and apply at a rate of 1 gallon per 10 square feet. Water management and gentle terracing to conserve topsoil and moisture. The Romans built landscapes to slow water and catch it where roots can use it. Even a small plot, really benefits from contouring beds so that water spreads rather than just rushing off. Shape beds in shallow swales across the slope and use compost-rich berms to hold seasonal rain, encouraging infiltration and deeper rooting. Mulch heavily with organic materials to limit evaporation, 2 to 3 inches is a practical depth, and edge beds with stone, logs, or living hedges to prevent erosion. When you give roots consistent access to moisture, plants allocate energy to fruit and root development rather than desperate survival, which, lowers susceptibility to pests and disease. Natural pest management, relies a lot on observation and timing. Roman gardeners were, keen observers who timed their plantings to avoid the worst pest pressure. Instead of wiping out pests completely, they used interventions that changed the pest environment just enough to keep things in balance. It's important to scout your beds every week and really get to know which insects are beneficial and which ones are, harmful. Only take action when those pest thresholds are crossed, rather than jumping in at the first sign of trouble. Hand-remove egg masses on brassicas deploy physical barriers like fine mesh for early-season pests and encourage predator habitat with a small patch of native flowers. If you intervene with sprays, favor fermented or botanical extracts prepared on-site rather than synthetic chemicals that suppress predators along with pests. Timing is everything. Sow faster maturing varieties before pests spike and use staggered planting to avoid offering a continuous, irresistible buffet. 2,000 years on, the Roman playbook reads like a manifesto against chemical dependency: build soil, diversify crops, work with water, and feed the microbiome. These are not romantic relics but practical, evidence-backed strategies that modern gardeners can apply immediately. Try one method this season and watch how the soil and plants respond. Layer these methods over 2 or 3 seasons, and you will have a garden that produces more while needing less intervention. If this deep dive fired up new ideas for your beds, please subscribe to Master Gardener for more field-tested techniques and share this video with gardeners who want to garden smarter, not harsher. Your support helps us revive these resilient practices and turn home gardens into living legacies.